Good day. This is the 8th video tutorial on Designer program. In today's lesson, we will build a complex strategy that uses candles of different time frames. The need to use candles of different time frames relates to the possibility of analyzing how the instrument behaves in different periods, how its performance depends on different periods of time. Knowing that there is growth over long periods of time, it is possible to create strategy behavior conditions for shorter periods, and vice versa. Let's start building a strategy. This strategy will consist of 2 branches, and each will have individual conditions to enter and exit the market. The strategy will work with candles of the 5-minute and daily timeframes and compare different indicators. Let's start with the first branch. Here, the strategy will buy if the closing price of a 5-minute candle is more than the maximum for the previous 20 days. The strategy will sell in this case if the closing price of a 5-minute candle is less than the minimum for 10 previous days. To build a strategy, we need to use the converter cube to get the closing price value and compare with the obtained values of the maximum and minimum for the previous period. We get these values using the indicator cube, in which we will consider the new setting and the previous value cube. First, we will build a standard schema for building candles. This time, we will use 2 candle cubes. Trading will go on 5-minute candles, so let's connect this cube with the chart panel cube. The second candles cube will be auxiliary. To check compliance with the strategy conditions, we will assign a 1-day time frame for it. It is very important that the market data for the candles of both time frames are downloaded. Recall the conditions of the first branch. If the closing price of a 5-minute candle is greater than the maximum for the previous 20 days, then the strategy buys, and the next trade, sell, if at least 10 previous days is higher than the closing price. To meet the conditions, it is necessary to obtain maximum and minimum values for specified periods. Get the closing price value and compare these values sequentially. It is also necessary to provide for a condition under which there will be no repeated buy or sell. For trade correctness. For the convenience of calculating the maximum values for a set period, the program provides an indicator. In the indicator settings, select the highest value. This indicator calculates the maximum value of the required indicator for the selected period and passes it. In our case, it will calculate the maximum candle value for 20 days and pass it on for comparison. Connect it to the candles cube. Now this cube will receive and pass the maximum value for 20 days. To compare the current value of the closing price of a 5-minute candle with the maximum over the previous 20 days, we will use the previous value cube, which will pass the maximum value for the previous 20 days. Select the cube and connect it with the indicator cube. In the settings, select the numeric data type and set the shift value to 1. The cube will now store the value for the previous 20 days, and it will be compared with the closing price. In order to determine the closing price of a 5-minute candle, we need to use the converter cube. In the cube settings, specify the value of the data closing price. After that, the cube will receive the closing price value from the candles cube and pass it on. In order to store the value of the maximum for 20 periods, we use the variable cube, which will receive, store, and pass the given value for comparison. Select the variable cube, specify the numeric data type in the settings, and set the value equal to 0. After that, the cube will receive and pass a value for comparison with the closing price value. In order to compare the values of the maximum and the closing price, you need to use the comparison cube. If the condition is met, then the strategy should buy. Select the comparison cube and connect it to the cubes with the maximum and closing price values. In the cube settings, set the comparison sign at which the closing price is higher than the maximum value. Now, if the closing price is greater than the maximum for the previous 20 days, then a true signal is generated at the cube output. Accordingly, the condition is met and the strategy must buy. However, it should be borne in mind that the strategy should not make consecutive trades in one direction. Accordingly, it is necessary to create a condition under which the next trade after a buy can only be a sale, or conversely, if there is a sale, then the next trade is only a buy. To fulfill this condition, use the composite flag cube. At the input, The cube receives a signal from the cube with conditions and passes the signal further while the flag is lowered, which prevents a repeat trade in the same direction until a trade occurs in the other direction. After that, a signal is sent to the cube flag to raise it, thereby observing the strategy correctness. It is also worth considering the following: that a raised flag is not always a signal to make a trade. It is important that the condition is met when the closing price is greater than the maximum over 20 days. If both conditions are met, then the trade will be done. To comply with these conditions, take the logic cube. We connect it with the flag cube and the comparison cube. Trades are now possible if two conditions are met at the same time, namely, the flag is raised and the closing price is more than maximum over the 20 past periods. The first part of the branch is ready. Now select the position registration cube and connect it to all the cubes. In the settings, we specify the trade direction, buy, and the market price. If both conditions are met, then a buy signal is sent from the logic cube to the buy cube trigger. Connect with the instrument. Also select two variable cubes, by which we set the order volume and portfolio for trading. So, we have created a part with the fulfillment of the conditions for buying. The position is closed by selling. With that, the conditions are as follows. If at least 10 previous days is higher than the closing price of a 5-minute candle, then the position is closed by selling. To calculate the minimum for a set period, we will use the indicator cube. Select an indicator cube and connect it to the candle cube. In the settings of this cube, set the value of lowest indicator, which calculates the minimum value for period. Set the period value to 10 days. Now this cube receives and passes the minimum candle value for 10 days. Based on the conditions, the position will need to be closed if the closing price of the 5-minute candle is less than 10 days minimum. To find out this value, as in the previous case, we will use the previous value cube and the variable cube, setting connections between cubes and the numeric data type. Similarly, we do for the variable cube. Thus, from the candle cube, we got the minimum value for 10 past periods. Now, in order to comply with the strategy conditions and to close the position, we need the closing price of the 5-minute candle was less than the value received. To check the condition, use the comparison cube. Select a comparison cube. We connect the cubes. Set the comparison sign in the settings to fulfill the condition that the closing price is less than the minimum value for 10 past periods. In order to close a position, two conditions must be met. The flag must be lowered, that is, before that a buy must be made, and the comparison condition was met. If met, then the strategy will sell. To check, use the logic cube, which will check compliance with all conditions via the AND operator. Connect the comparison cube socket. Since there is a flag on the cube, after the buy trade, a false signal is generated, indicating the possibility of a sale. For a logical check, it is necessary to convert this signal to true using the logic cube. Select the logic cube, assign a value to the NOT operator, and connect it to the cubes. Now the logic cube checks if the flag is lowered, that is, if the sale is allowed, and the execution condition. When the closing price is less than the minimum for the last 10 periods. Similarly, we select the order registration cube and assign it the sale direction and the market price. We connect all the sockets. Now, after the sale is made, a signal should be given to raise the flag. This signal will be given from the logic cube, simultaneously with the sell signal. This signal will come to the input socket and signal to overwrite, raising the flag. So now, our strategy compares the data obtained with indicator and converter cubes. And if the maximum value for the previous 20 days is less than the closing price of the 5-minute candle, the strategy buys, and the flag cube is triggered, which prevents rebuy. The position is closed if the received minimum value for the previous 10 days is greater than the closing price of the 5-minute period. With that, a signal is given to the flag cube, which is raised for buy trades and prevents resale. Let's run the strategy. We will use the network storage as the source of the market data. As you can see, orders are registered sequentially. Buy, sale, buy, sale. That is, the position is opened by buying, after which the flag is lowered. The position is closed by selling, and the flag is raised. Now, let's build the second branch of the strategy with different conditions, and connect both branches into a whole strategy. The conditions will be as follows. The strategy enters the market from the sale if the minimum value of the previous 20 days is greater than the closing price of the 5-minute candle. With that, as in the first case, it is necessary that not only the comparison condition is met, but also the flag state. The second branch of strategy is built in the same way as the first. The only comparison conditions will be changed. We also get the minimum values with the indicator cube and use the previous value and variable cubes. Then pass the resulting value for comparison with the closing price value to the comparison cube. In the comparison cube, set the sign of the fulfillment of conditions, in which the closing price is less than the minimum for the specified periods. For correct operation and not making consecutive trades in one direction, we use the flag cube. Also use the logic cube to compare two conditions, inequality and flag state. Now, if the condition is met that the closing price is less than the minimum for the previous 20 days and the flag is raised, this strategy branch will sell. To close a position, it is necessary that the closing price of a 5-minute candle is greater than the maximum of the previous 10 days, and the flag was lowered. This part is built similarly to the previous. It turns out the maximum value for the previous 10 days and is compared with the closing price. Using a Boolean function, the flag cube value in the lowered state is converted to true. And with the logic cube, the inequality fulfillment and the flag state is checked. Then a signal is given to buy and to raise the flag. So we have built two branches of the strategy. If the condition is initially met that the maximum of the previous 20 days is less than the closing price, then the strategy opens a position with a buy while lowering the flag to prevent a second buy. The position is closed if at least 10 previous days is higher than the closing price of the 5-minute candle. With that, the flag is raised. If the condition is initially met, according to which at least 20 previous days is higher than the closing price, then the strategy opens a position by sell while lowering the flag to prevent a repeated sale. The position is closed if the maximum for the previous 10 days is less than the closing price of the 5-minute candle. With that, the flag is raised. In order for the strategy to work correctly, it is necessary that both branches do not work at the same time, and they work consistently. To do this, we will provide a flag cube, which will be lowered after one of the two initial conditions is triggered, and it will rise after the position is closed in one of the two branches. Select a flag cube. A signal from the comparison cube will be sent to the input of this cube, which will indicate the fulfillment of one of the conditions. Connect comparison cubes with flag cube. So this strategy will trade on the first branch if the flag is raised and the condition is met, at which the closing price is greater than the maximum for the previous 20 days. To comply with this condition, use the logic cube. Connect the sockets with the flag cube and the comparison cube and specify the logical AND operator in the settings. Now a signal will be generated on this cube that the strategy starts trading on the first branch. However, in order to meet the final condition for the first branch operation and buy-by strategy, it is necessary the internal flagger branch must be raised, the condition for opening a position is met, and the flag between the branches must be raised. To do this, connect the resulting logic cube with the logic internal cube. Now, if the following conditions are met, the main flag is raised, the closing price is greater than the maximum of the previous periods, and the inner flag is raised, then the strategy starts to trade. After that, the main flag and flag inside the branch are lowered. In order to raise the main flag, it is necessary to close the position and send a signal to the socket of flag cube. Similarly, we build the schema for the second branch. We also provide for checking conditions using the logic cube. We connect the cubes to check that all conditions are met, that the main flag is raised, the closing price is less than the minimum for previous periods, and the internal flag is raised. Also, the main flag will be raised when the position is closed. Let's run our strategy using the network storage as the data source. As you can see, orders go sequentially. There is no duplications. Trades are also made. You can view the conditions of each of them. The profit and loss charts show that the strategy trades into profit. Consider statistics. Here is the maximum profit that the user receives. Strategy drawdown. It can be seen that the number of profitable trades exceeds the number of unprofitable ones. Thus, it can be assumed that the strategy works and the conditions are met. Based on this, it is necessary to conclude that the use of candles of different time frames for trading conditions can significantly facilitate the work of a trader by making the market more predictable and the strategy flexible. The trader gets the opportunity to potentially predict the market behavior, thereby increasing profits, and also reduce possible risks. Using indicator cubes, a trader can determine the maximum and minimum values of interest to him by building a more complex but more profitable strategy. That's all. Thanks. Goodbye.